I got my mistress pregnant. I'm divorcing you, so don't bother coming home.
The letter enclosed with the divorce papers contained cruel words. I had hoped my husband, John, would be happy about the birth of our child, but instead, he was busy cheating with his mistress. He didn't even attend the birth or help name our child. I could no longer forgive John. While calming down my furious parents, I headed to my in-laws' house.
I'm truly sorry. We must have gone wrong somewhere in raising him.
Upon reading the letter, my in-laws, Ron and Linda, turned pale and apologized to us. They are such good people that it made me feel even more guilty. Ron sighed deeply and muttered to Linda,
Should we crush him?
My name is Emily. I'm 35. I met John in my early 20s at a movie theater. John had tripped on the carpet and spilled popcorn all over the floor. I hurried to help him, and John bought me a drink as an apology, and we became close. It just so happened that we were both there to see a limited run of a famous animated movie. The protagonist shared my name, Emily. John, a fan of the movie, was excited.
Your name is Emily. I love that movie. It doesn't feel like you're a stranger at all.
I love it too. Have you seen the latest animated movie? We shared the same interests and became movie buddies, and eventually, John and I started dating. Then, at a restaurant themed around movies, he proposed to me with a ring, and I decided to share my life with him. John had received a company from his father Ron, a businessman, and was thriving as a young president. So after getting married, I quit my previous job and joined the company as a director, getting involved in management. It was fulfilling work where I could use my business school experience. I had thought my in-laws would be intimidating celebrities, but they were not at all like that. They were friendly from the first meeting, and after getting married, they continued to care for us without being overbearing. They kept a respectful distance, but were not pushy.
Emily, I got some gourmet coupons. Let's go eat something delicious together. Oh, and feel free to say no if you're busy.
They would invite me out to eat and cook for me. I love cooking with my mill, Linda. She generously shared secret ingredients and tips for sauces, and I would try them out at home and serve them to John. Even when we disagreed, it was never serious, just playful arguments. Ron was so considerate, it was almost too much.
Would it be tacky to give Mama moisturizer for her birthday? I'm at the department store right now. I'll buy some moisturizer for you too, Emily.
He would say that, giving me cosmetics I had wanted for a long time, as if it were advice fees. Their loving relationship always made me smile. I hoped John and I could have a relationship like my in-laws. However, the peaceful life didn't last long. When my pregnancy became apparent, a new employee joined the company. Nancy, who was hired mid-career and seemed competent, was very beautiful. During the interview, she said something that caught attention.
I was harassed at my previous company.
It turns out, she had been harassed as a new graduate at her first job, and even at the next company she joined, which led her to resign. I was in charge of HR, but I had an appointment for a checkup, so John handled Nancy's interview. Despite it being odd to bring up past harassment at a new job, it was decided for us to be considerate to Nancy, who must have had a tough time before. Especially, John seemed to like her, giving her a supervisory role soon after she joined. Isn't it too soon to be in a higher position just after joining?
It'll be fine. She has more work experience than a fresh grad, after all.
I felt a bit uneasy about John's personal management. And indeed, it turned out Nancy was quite a character. First of all, she was very rude. To be precise, her tone was polite, but her words were harsh. For example, when dealing with mistakes made by new or young employees at work, it goes beyond merely pointing out the mistakes. The criticism is particularly harsh regarding their educational background.
Oh, is this the kind of mistake your alma mater trained you to make? Is your university a kindergarten? Oh, sorry, I guess it's just your brain that's lacking.
Although it's a common mistake that just needs more caution in the future, the way she belittles people is harsh.
Your parents must feel sorry for raising such an incompetent person.
Such comments, even going as far as to insult someone's parents, are unacceptable for a professional. Of course, I've pointed it out, but there's no sign of remorse. That's not a good way to speak. You shouldn't attack someone's character.
People who aren't beneficial to the company are just a waste, right? I'm just doing my job as a senior by pointing it out and giving guidance.
Just like that, she was completely unapologetic. Nancy, she really has a way with words. What should we do?
It's fine, isn't it? She's still adjusting, right? Picking on the newbies isn't cool.
Saying this, John didn't take my advice. Being pregnant, I couldn't get too involved in company matters, but the atmosphere around Nancy was deteriorating. Although Nancy boasted about being excellent, others didn't see her as all that competent. She might be good at studying and memorization, having knowledge about the job, but she often couldn't apply it practically. Perhaps due to a habit of negligence, she frequently relied on existing templates without necessary modifications. Because she wouldn't change what needed to be changed, she constantly received corrections. Seemingly displeased with this, she was full of excuses trying to justify herself.
I was just working efficiently. Maybe the way we do things around here is inefficient, don't you think?
I understand your point, but this format is what fits in with our company.
It's poor guidance from the supervisors. The mistakes I made were beyond my control, not my fault. Besides, since you're pregnant, shouldn't you just stay away from the company more?
No matter how many times she's corrected, we couldn't see any improvements from her. Nancy, having said something to John, caused him to even started blaming me.
Hey, Nancy's a pool thing. What if your words hurt her and she quits?
Moreover, Nancy often brags about buying expensive deli food from the department store.
Employee cafeterias are so tacky. It's just smarter and a better use of time to eat out and occasionally cook with high-end ingredients at home.
Saying this, she tries to one-up others. I make vegetable-centered lunches for John, but even that's ridiculed by her.
Home-cooked meals, more like brown mush. The presentation is awful, and it'd be 100 times better just to buy something. Poor president.
That's right. Nancy has a point. The president wouldn't eat something like this.
Saying this, John stopped taking the lunches I prepared. I don't like to make comparisons, but Ron, who sticks to the motto keep unnecessary expenses low, earns a lot yet enjoys his mother's homemade sandwiches. As a result, our expenses on eating out and buying ready-made meals keep adding up, increasingly straining our budget. Since Nancy joined, the relationship between me and John has been strained,
You've really packed on the pounds recently. What happened to how you looked before getting pregnant?
It's just my body type.
Huh, nice. Pregnant women get to be lazy, huh?
John makes a displeased face as I struggle with morning sickness and can't maintain my figure or beauty during pregnancy. His parents are always nice to me, so it was hard to speak up about their son, John. As morning sickness started, it became difficult to continue working, and I began to stay at home. Encouraged by my parents, I considered going back to my hometown for the birth, but John was reluctant.
Why would you do that? Who's going to take care of me while you're gone?
You'll have to manage on your own.
You just want to take it easy, don't you? No one I know does this. Going back home for birth isn't normal statistically speaking.
I wonder whose statistics those are. John apparently told Nancy about it too.
Going back home for the birth? Isn't that a bit too dependent? I can't respect a company president's wife like that.
And such an email arrived from Nancy. Why do I have to be subjected to this? My frustration grew day by day. Nancy's condescension wasn't just directed at subordinates, but also at older employees. One day, just before going back home for my maternity leave, I went shopping for maternity goods and miscellaneous items. There, I ran into an employee, Mary, who happened to be buying envelopes and stationery. She looked clearly distressed, and upon asking, I found out she was intending to write her resignation letter. Mary had been repeatedly harassed by Nancy. Mary, a top graduate from a high school with specialized knowledge and a bookkeeping certification, was a valuable asset immediately upon hiring. Ron had scouted her and always valued her greatly. In fact, Mary was the most active contributor in our company. Without her, the company would suffer a significant loss. She didn't desire a high-ranking position because she needed to care for her triplets. I don't know how Nancy found out or if she forced it out of her, but as soon as Nancy learned about Mary's high school education, she blatantly ridiculed her and started ignoring her greetings. Mary was in a managerial position in a different department, but if requests came through her, Nancy blatantly ignored them. Mary, angered, confronted Nancy directly. But Nancy mocked her by saying, "You're a high school graduate, T-Fect. Why should I prioritize the work of someone so lowly? Your kids are a poor thing to be raised by someone like you." She said something outrageous. Mary was naturally furious and pressed Nancy about it.
My education has nothing to do with this. Why do you have to bring up my children?
I think Mary was rightfully angry. But apparently dissatisfied with this, Nancy made a big fuss to John.
I was publicly denounced and harassed in front of everyone. I suffered mental distress.
Normally, Nancy would be the one reprimanded, but astonishingly, John completely sided with her.
What is this? A veteran pressing a newcomer? Just because you've been here a long time doesn't mean you can get carried away.
Eventually, it was settled with Mary apologizing to Nancy. A little investigation would clearly show that Nancy was the problem. Of course, Nancy was smug about it.
Well, I'm generous enough to forgive someone like you. From now on, know your place.
She didn't think she was at fault at all.
She apologized. I'm in the right.
And with that, she just became more arrogant. As a favorite of the president, even veterans became her targets, and it seemed no one could say anything anymore. Nancy's unruly behavior only got worse. She sent rude emails to business partners, so it became absolutely necessary to double-check her communications. Her emails were long-winded rants, or informal to the point of calling important people from other companies by their first names, issues that predate professional etiquette.
Well, if Nancy is as pretty as she is, a few mistakes can be forgiven, right?
John, you're so kind.
John kept making such clueless remarks. The business partner was a fairly large one, so later I was told to go and apologize along with the executive director, but Nancy refused to accompany us.
Why do I have to go apologize? There's no need to be so humble.
That was the tone all along. So a few months after Nancy joined, she was completely treated like a hot potato. People would greet her and interact with her for work, but otherwise, she was totally untouchable. No matter how often it was pointed out, she would not adhere to the company's specified dimensions, and she maintained her usual attitude even when corrected.
It's unpleasant to be criticized by low-educated people like you, so don't point it out.
So now, it seems easier to just correct everything at the final stage without saying anything. I had no idea it had come to this.
Emily, you're pregnant, and it must be hard, so I understand you can't say much. It's okay about me, but when she talks about my kids.
Mary seemed even more distressed as she recalled Nancy's words.
I'm sorry for doing this on my own, but once my child secures a job, I won't have to work so frantically anymore. Maybe retiring is one option here.
Saying that, Mary smiled at me, obviously concerned for my well-being.
The resignation letter is just a precaution. I still have responsibilities, and quitting abruptly would be rude. I'll try to hang in there for a few more months. Have a healthy baby, okay?
Filled with regret, all I could do was watch Mary walk away. After returning home, I confronted John, but it was to no avail.
You're not at the office right now, so you don't understand the situation. You shouldn't even be speaking up.
But it's too much even for Mary. We should value our employees, shouldn't we?
That's why I am valuing Nancy. Honestly, Mary is already old, and she won't contribute much to the company moving forward. Maybe it's time to consider a change.
John left the house clearly in a bad mood. Lately, he's been staying out more, and something felt off. He wasn't helping at all with naming our child, and it seemed like his heart was drifting further from me. In my final month of pregnancy, I noticed that my toenail had split. I couldn't reach my feet anymore because my belly was in the way, and I asked John, who was in the living room. My toenail split, but I can't cut it myself. Could you help me trim it a little? John's response was a complete turnaround.
You want me to do menial tasks like that?
He slammed the newspaper on the floor, swept all the items off the table, and stormed out, stomping loudly. I wonder if he realizes whose child I'm carrying. After all, I've even cut his nails before. Realizing this was not good for the baby, I decided to go to my parents' home early. When I told John, his response was dismissive.
Fine, fine, just leave already.
I assume it goes without saying, but please come to the hospital when the baby is born, okay?
I'm busy, you know.
Doesn't he care that our child is being born? Isn't he looking forward to it? Even though John had been so against for me to go to my parents' home for the birth, he agreed so easily now, which felt strange, but people change. Men often realize they are becoming fathers later on, I told myself. After John left for work, my father, who was looking forward to the arrival of his grandchild, came to pick me up. At my parents' house, I could relax and spend time with them. My in-laws also kept in touch, maintaining a respectful distance. However, I hardly had any contact with John. A month later, I gave birth at a major hospital. This is our first child, right? I want you to be there. If not inside, then at least wait outside the delivery room.
I'm busy with work. Do you think I can just run over because my child is being born?
My parents and in-laws were furious and tried calling him multiple times. However, John must have blocked my calls because he never showed up for the birth of our child. Our baby was a girl, truly adorable and angelic. But since we hadn't really discussed names, I ended up choosing Sophia for her. While I was recovering at my parents' house, taking care of Sophia, an envelope arrived from John by mail. Inside was a divorce petition, and a letter was enclosed.
I got my mistress pregnant, so don't come back home.
There was also a photo of him making a peace sign with a woman inside our house. The woman was Nancy. My parents were livid, their faces turning red with anger. Despite the clear betrayal by John, I felt strangely calm. I wonder if his parents know about this. My parents and I immediately went to see my in-laws.
Oh dear, did you come to show us little Sophia?
My in-laws welcomed us warmly, but I had to tell them. While my mother took care of Sophia in another room, I showed the divorce papers and the letter to my in-laws. Linda was speechless, and Ron turned pale.
I thought something was off with him lately, but I never imagined it had come to this.
We've been feeling like he was being bothersome to us too. I'm really sorry, Emily. We must have gone wrong somewhere in raising him.
Watching my in-laws apologizing deeply was truly heart-wrenching. Please stop. I didn't come here for you to apologize to me like this. I hurriedly made Ron and Linda lift their faces. Ron sighed deeply and muttered to Linda.
Should we crush him?
After reuniting with my in-laws, we decided to return to the house where John was. Ron and Linda rang the doorbell with a furious expression, and John came out in a panic.
What's going on? All of a sudden.
What kind of person are you? Don't you feel sorry for what you've done to Emily?
Overlapping John's words, Ron confronted him. John scratched his head with an annoyed expression and clicked his tongue.
PCH. Don't rat me out.
He glared at me. Then, Nancy casually appeared behind him.
John, who's that?
As soon as she saw me, she almost burst out laughing.
What? The loser wife? Huh? Did you sign the divorce papers?
Why are you even here?
You can see, right? John and I are starting a new life of love here. You've been dumped, so pack your things and leave.
How audacious can they get? Fueled by their unrepentant attitude, my in-laws stormed through the entrance and headed straight to the living room. When I saw the living room, I was speechless. It had been completely redecorated to their taste. Maternity items with Nancy's name were everywhere, and their pictures were displayed on the shelves. It seemed they had completely taken over while I was away for my childbirth. The discussion began, but the two were utterly defiant.
John, Emily was trying her best to give birth to your child. It was strange you didn't even come to see the baby. And now this.
You lied to us. You prioritized your affair over important business meetings.
Confronted by someone superior, John sulked.
Well, she got fat from the pregnancy and expected me to suddenly start acting like a dad, which is presumptuous. Nancy, who respects me, is obviously the better choice, right? I even started to find the child unattractive midway.
Being a father is the most basic responsibility.
Ron yelled so loudly that John jumped, and Linda slapped him while crying.
Pathetic. You're also to blame. You don't even look at Sophia even though she's your child.
Indeed, as Linda said, John had barely glanced at Sophia, let alone held her. He probably thinks Nancy's child is cuter.
That's so annoying. She kept updating me about this ugly baby's growth, but frankly, I couldn't care less. I don't want to hear about it after coming home from work. Be grateful I didn't say just raise her by yourself.
Exactly. John was struggling. Hearing about an unattractive baby getting bigger in an ultrasound or gaining a few grams is just not interesting.
It was maddening. Poor Sophia, disliked by her own father from birth.
What kind of person are you? When you see your wife immobile from her pregnancy, or your child who looks like she could break any moment, you should feel a sense of urgency to protect them before anything else.
That's right. I will not acknowledge a child from an affair you had while knowing you were married. We only care about Emily and Sophia.
The two seemed as if my in-law's words didn't reach them. No matter what else was said, it wouldn't resonate with them. If that was the case, it would be much better to just get a divorce quickly. While consulting with my in-laws, I had John sign the alimony demand letter we drafted together. Then, we filed the divorce papers at the courthouse. Now that the divorce is finalized, why don't you just get married?
Well, despite being old, you're pretty sharp.
How miserable to be thrown out with just a few $100,000 in alimony.
They stamped the documents vigorously, showing off to me. When they asked me to be a witness, I was beyond sadness and humiliation. I was utterly appalled. When we got home, my in-laws declared they were cutting ties with them. Upon hearing this, their faces turned pale. Did they really think they would still be accepted after all this?
You're disowning your own son.
We're blood related too. We'll become better children, we promise.
Nancy glared at me. Her pride was high, probably soaking in a sense of superiority for having taken John from me. However, my in-laws cherished me, which she couldn't stand. But the consequences for John and her wouldn't end there.
Also, you are stepping down as president.
What?
Of course, you are not fit to be president, favoring your affair partner and causing suffering to other employees. Everyone knows.
John was at a loss for words. Had he been aware?
But I am the president.
Yeah, right? Just because you're the parents doesn't mean you can just fire him.
That's true. If you don't want to retire willingly, it's not going to be immediate.
Ron's words made them lift their chins triumphantly.
But can you two really continue to run the company?
What do you mean?
I secretly surveyed your employees. They said if you remain as president, they would leave the company. It was originally one of my companies, so they all cooperated.
John and Nancy were speechless. If they all quit simultaneously, the company would immediately become inoperable.
Stop threatening me, Dad. Those guys, they can't find another job.
I've promised to hire them in a new department I'm establishing in my company. Seems they really hated the current one. Everyone was quite pleased.
What? Those traitors?
They shrieked, their faces turning a fiery red. However, with Ron's careful planning, they were left with no choice, and John agreed to step down as president.
But you'll at least keep us as executives, right? We can't live otherwise. Don't demote us to ordinary employees. Right, Nancy? Nancy can become the next president.
Sorry, but the next president has already been decided.
Ron spoke confidently, leaving John flustered.
Who is it?
It's Mary. She's the most experienced, and Emily will support her in the presidency. You don't have to worry about anything. You're not just demoted, you're fired.
Hearing that Mary was the successor, Nancy's mouth fell open, and soon she began to throw a tantrum.
Why her? How can someone with just a high school diploma become president?
Don't be rude. Mary has been cleaning up your mess at work. Oh, and unfortunately, due to compliance issues and numerous complaints about you, we can't employ you anymore.
No.
Nancy started tearing at her hair.
It's all because everyone speaks ill of me. They're jealous of my superior education. You believe those who fabricate such baseless bad reputations?
Was this a state of delirium? Nancy continued to shriek disgracefully. In fact, after parting with Mary, I immediately reported the situation at the company to my in-laws. Ron had been keeping out of company affairs, thinking it wouldn't help John. Upon learning about Mary's situation, Nancy's tyranny, and John's negligence, Ron immediately contacted Mary. He apologized for John's and Nancy's rudeness and approached her about becoming the next president. Mary, surprised, agreed to take over the role.
And one more thing. Are you really the graduate your resume claims?
Nancy had been hired essentially on the spot due to John's infatuation, labeled as an interview. This meant no background check had been conducted on Nancy. If her claims were to be believed, Nancy boasted of graduating from a prestigious university with honors. Her parents and relatives also had impressive backgrounds and were quite wealthy. Nancy often bragged about this, yet oddly, she never seemed grateful to her parents. With a salary that didn't match her age or position, she owned several expensive watches and frequently updated her expensive electronics, living alone in a luxurious high-end apartment. Socially, she appeared to be a winner leading a lavish lifestyle. It was questionable why someone like her would want to work for us.
I get bored staying at home.
That's her only excuse. I've seen wealthy people who are friendly with my in-laws. They all seem so calm. It made me believe the saying, "Wealth does not fight," was indeed true. Despite supposedly being part of the elite group, Nancy's aggressiveness and tendency to blame others, coupled with a strong victim mentality, could only be described as poor upbringing.
I'm sorry to say this, but I had it checked. You were indeed at that university, but it turns out you dropped out. And the reason was due to plagiarism in reports and your thesis. Other misconducts were repeated, too. It didn't take long to find out.
Nancy bit her lip and looked down. John stood up and started accusing Nancy.
So, you lied to me. Is that why you never invited me to your house?
What? I approached you because you were the president. Why has it come to this?
It seems Nancy's parents are somewhat wealthy. However, due to her academic fraud, and dropping out. They wanted her to face the real world, thus pushed her to get a job. But even there, her tyrannical behavior got her fired, and after causing significant losses to the company, they gave her severance money and kicked her out. The amount was enough for a while to maintain her lavish lifestyle, but it was inevitable that Nancy couldn't cut back on her expenses. Eventually, her savings ran dry, and she even started accumulating debt. That's when she seduced John, a young president, planning to secure a spot as his wife by getting pregnant. Her behavior in the company was due to the belief that eventually everyone would be under her, using her unfinished university degree to look down on others. Losing the presidency to Mary was an immense humiliation for her. The harassment at her previous job was a preemptive strike and an interview strategy to garner sympathy. I realized as I looked at her like she was an alien.
So I lost the company because of you. That child of yours must be a lie too.
No, this is really your child.
Despite becoming parents, the two started an ugly fight. When I was feeling sick from my pregnancy, John was having an affair with Nancy and mocking me. Their downfall was their own doing. My in-laws kicked John and Nancy out and told me to stay in the house, but I refused. After battling morning sickness and preparing a space for the baby goods, I couldn't stand returning to a home filled with John and Nancy's wedding photos and paraphernalia. I wanted to get away from a home that had been redecorated to flaunt their happiness. John and Nancy left the current company. Apparently, their married life wasn't going well. John had been expecting financial support from Ron and had little savings.
How can you just abandon me like that? Do Mom and Dad hate me now too?
You abandoned Emily and Sophia. If you want help, apologize to Emily first.
Why should I apologize to her? I absolutely won't.
John was stubbornly unwilling to apologize. Using his friend's connections, he started working at another company. But fitting in wasn't easy for someone who had been at the top. For example, John left a meeting with a partner company midway through and never returned, instead going straight back to his office.
He was so boring that I didn't think it was worth my time. I know these things because I was the president before.
He laughed it off even when scolded for such behavior. But there were worse blunders. He received a delivery from a client, but forgot to send the invoice to accounting.
I should have received the invoice in time for this month's payment deadline, right?
Pushed by the client, he finally checked and discovered the paperwork was amiss. His response was unapologetic.
I totally forgot to pass it on to accounting. The payment will be next month.
That's a problem. I sent it over a month and a half ago. This is your mistake, isn't it? Please deal with this urgently.
So, what? I just sent it to accounting, and normally it would be the month after next, but I asked them to make an exception and do it next month. Aren't you being a bit pushy now?
Incredibly, John snapped at the client who was making a perfectly reasonable request. His tone was full of self-victimization and frustration. The client was furious.
Blaming others for your mistakes. How appropriate is that? I can't discuss this with you. Let me talk to your boss.
What? Why do you need to involve my boss when it's my job?
Hey, do you even realize the inconvenience you're causing? You're being told to step aside because you lack any sense of responsibility. Get it together.
Scolded, John quickly grew tired of his job. His actions even angered a usually mild-mannered client to an extreme degree, causing problems within the company.
I can't believe you're looking down on me.
Instead of showing any remorse in a situation that would normally cause one to blanch, John stubbornly refused to apologize and ended up getting fired. Naturally, this cut off his source of income, and with constant conflicts with Nancy, he bounced from job to job. He frequently asked his parents for financial help, but they consistently refused. A year later, I was raising Sophia under the watchful eyes of my parents and in-laws. One day, while holding Sophia outside my parents' house, I noticed a man standing there. While I was soothing Sophia, I thought he seemed intensely focused on us.
Ugh.
Suddenly, he started to sob, covering his mouth. "What's the matter?" The man suddenly approached, trying to touch Sophia. I instinctively stepped back, and when I looked at his face, it was John. He looked emaciated, and as if he hadn't been living well. "John."
You've raised Sophia to be so big. Were you waiting for me?
He was saying things that made no sense. Just as John reached out to us, my father, seeing this, rushed over.
Why are you here? Leave.
Wait, I came to pick up Emily.
John claimed his married life had been dreadful. Nancy had given birth, but they had no money and were living in poverty. DNA tests confirmed that the baby was indeed John's child, but debt collectors were causing them trouble. When Nancy tried to return to her previous company, Mary personally came out and turned her away. Seeing the company thriving and harmonious without her drove Nancy to a meltdown.
Why, I'm more suited to be in charge.
Please leave. You're causing distress to the staff. There is no place for you here anymore.
Mary calmly handed Nancy over to the security guards as she threw a tantrum. John and Nancy's relationship was at its worst, and John expressed a desire to leave Nancy and the baby and come back.
She used to be so beautiful, and now she's just a mess. Hey, Emily, come back home. If you're there, I can kick Nancy out.
What are you talking about? Trying to abandon your new family just shows you haven't changed at all. I will never let Sophia see you again. Don't come near us ever. John's face crumbled into despair.
You've become too much like a mother. It's terrible how you've lost all your innocence.
If you don't leave, I'll call the police.
My father slammed his hand on the wall, his voice booming with authority, which seemed to frighten John enough to make him flee in haste.
I'm sorry about our foolish son.
When I told my in-laws, they apologized profusely and agreed to hire a security company.
If he lurks around again, we won't hold back.
With that, my father, a former wrestling enthusiast, began practicing again, almost making me worry more for John than for us. Though it seems unlikely that I'll have anything to do with John and Nancy again, the intense stress they caused me often appears in my dreams, reminding me how desperately I want that to be the last time. In my arms, Sophia sleeps peacefully. Even without a father, she has strong allies in her grandparents and in-laws. She will surely be happy. Above all, I am committed to living positively for the life in front of me.